Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Leduc-Catlin here at Lux Media. I am here today to tell you about an important new film. I want to start by telling you why I am involved with this film. And there have been many films about COVID over the last several years, but this film I'm particularly excited about because this is the first mainstream film. What do I mean by that? This is the film that we can show to our friends, our families, and colleagues, those people who have not been open or receptive to some of the information that's been available to us. Today, I'm interviewing the filmmaker, Vanessa Dylyn. Vanessa is an award-winning filmmaker. She has an Emmy Award nomination. She has worked with some incredible people on a number of different projects. She has sold films to National Geographic, CBC, Netflix. I'm just name-dropping all the big names just to give you a sense of who this woman is. And she is my guest today. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Michelle.
I want to just get right into this I've talked about some of the films that you've made, not the films that you've made, but some of the places that you have made films for. And I want to ask you, given the kinds of films you've made, these are big idea films, yes?
Exactly, yes.
So what are some of the ideas you've taken on in the past, and why did you decide to take on this one?
Okay, well, I've been making documentary films for about 20 years, and I become interested in a subject when I think the public probably needs to know something about that subject that it doesn't know. So I've made 3 films about brain science because we have had some really remarkable innovators in that field. And then I've made a number of films about terrorism because that's just part of the tapestry of our world right now. And but I will also make more lighthearted films. I did a biographical film on Leslie Caron, who was the one of Hollywood's last remaining big musical stars. If I think the film is going to be or that it will serve some public good, I will probably get interested in that topic. For example, I do tend to deal with medical science, so I'm completing a film with an Alberta filmmaker right now called The Good Virus, about a possible solution to superbugs. And I've just completed a film with White Pine Pictures about the impact of microplastics on human health. So that takes me to a very important period that we've all lived through, and that's the COVID period. And so I became specifically interested in the science of lockdowns and the science surrounding the lab leak theory. And I became interested in specifically about the suppression of science because I felt that the public, let's say, rounded information. Early in 2020, I noticed that there were a number of highly credentialed scientists from Stanford, such as Jay Bhattacharya, Sunetra Gupta from Oxford, and Martin Kulldorff from Harvard, 3 leaders in their fields who were against lockdowns. And I couldn't understand why the medical institutions, right from the National Institutes of Health down through the mainstream media, just humiliated them. And I felt there was something going on. And then there were other scientists who were very suspicious of this evolutionary theory of where the virus came from. The established medical institutions kept saying, "Oh, this was from a wet market in Wuhan," and scientists were saying, "Well, if you look at the genome of this virus and you decode the genome, there's this little thing in there called a fern cleavage, and sorry, that doesn't occur in nature. That occurs when a virus is manipulated in a lab." Yet the scientists who were putting this forward were being called conspiracy theorists. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just thinking it's such a remarkable time when you have these top scientists who are being called, I mean, it's such a ridiculous epithet, right? Conspiracy theorists. It's just like a catch-all. And yet these, as you said, leading scientists are being kind of thrown under the bus, just accused of not doing what they're supposed to do. And yet they're the ones who are trying to get the truth out.
Exactly. Exactly. So what happened was I then decided to construct the film around two leading storylines. One, how did we lock down? What was the scientific basis upon which we locked down? And also, what is the lab leak theory? Why were the powers that be, whether it was medical institutions, Anthony Fauci and his team, why were they very eager to suppress the entire notion that the virus could have been manipulated in a lab?
Have some extraordinary interviews. I mean, you have Jay Bhattacharya as the key player, and you also have Dr. Scott Atlas. What was the experience of working with these people, and what was the experience of making this film?
The experience of making this film, first of all, I am eternally grateful to these scientists for appearing in our film and giving us the hours and hours of their time. The experience of making this film has been extremely overwhelming. The content of the film is probably the most challenging that I've ever had to deal with, because it's not a current event story, but we were getting new information every day. So we had interviews, very complex interviews to deal with. Then we had a tremendous number of archive, and we had to make sure that we were able to edit the film to follow these two storylines, and that the archives would be edited into the film seamlessly. So many moving parts. And my experience was that this was the loneliest, most challenging 2 years of my professional life. And it was a very lonely struggle, because outside of the creative team that worked with me on the film, my own field was rather hostile to this film. I found myself keeping quiet about this film, talking about my other films, but not this film, because when I had tried to, people were rather just hostile about it. They asked, "Well, I mean, what's the story?" They said everyone did the best that they could. There's no story here. They kept telling me that hindsight is 2020, but we all know the film isn't about hindsight. It's not about looking back from where we are. It's about what happened to us back then. And so the film was exceptionally difficult from a creative standpoint, but extremely difficult from an emotional standpoint. I mean, we had people who were very reluctant to work on the film, who were business people. So it was difficult to get a business affairs person to work on the film. Recently, we had a closed captioning technician say, "Oh, don't agree with this, I'm not working on it." So it's that kind of reaction, which I found extremely troubling in a field that is supposed to be open, in documentary filmmaking that is supposed to be open to different points of view, and open to a serious investigative film.
It's remarkable to me that 4 years in, you're still experiencing that people, not only are you experiencing that, but that people aren't even open to inquiring about these issues at this point? I mean, you would think that since we all suffered through this period, that we would at least want to look back and say, okay, so, what happened there?
Yes.
I
Yes.
also think it's relevant to the audience that what you experienced making this film, because I think so many of us, maybe all of us, experienced some kind of that loneliness, that exclusion from various communities, the hostility. So I think it's really important that people know that this is something that you've experienced just in the making of the film.
Yes. And actually, Michelle, one of the reasons I made the film was not just to um, really examine the importance of science and the importance of really good factual information, and that the public has a right to be informed of other voices. But I also made it because I noticed in our society, and I noticed this like many other people, that there was a disproportionate burden on an entire class of people in bearing this pandemic. That there was an entire laptop class who was staying home, and that's fine. These were government workers or related government workers, and they were being paid to stay home. They had their children at home. They were supervising their kids. Some of them had the income to take their kids out or to take their kids to the cottage, but there was an entire class of workers, and I'm talking about pre-vaccine here, who actually had to show up somewhere to get paid. And I'm talking about all of those men who drove trucks across borders so that we could eat. I'm talking about those people in grocery stores who stocked shelves so that we could shop. I'm talking about people who worked in kitchens making food so that we could have takeout, and people who worked in warehouses such as Amazon so that we could order our packages. Um, and I noticed too that, and I think this was not lost. I think many people noticed that small businesses were being driven bankrupt. They were told to close, yet big box stores stayed open. So it appeared that you could catch COVID if you went to your local hardware store but you wouldn't catch COVID if you bought the nails at Costco somewhere.
Somebody pointed out to me recently about being in a bar. I mean, we all know the stories of going to a restaurant with a mask, sitting down, you take off the mask, you put on. But he actually pointed out that he was in a bar where the bar stool was literally the same height as somebody standing, but you take off the mask on the bar stool. And the person standing beside him would have to keep it on. I mean, there's so many absurdities, but I'm so glad you brought up the thing about the working class. It was actually one of the first things that I read Jay Bhattacharya talking about, and I think it's something that really hasn't been addressed. There is so much about this film that is going to be valuable for people to see. Particularly, what I want to point out is that this is a highly vetted film, right? So has very high journalistic standards and also legal standards. Do you want to just speak to that a little bit?
Certainly. Yes, that was another terrifying experience. So we had to get this cleared because I'm working within the Canadian CRTC system, and I have Canada Media Fund funding, and the broadcaster is your regular Canadian broadcaster, Newtank Dynasty. I had to get insurance, and this entails, especially in this film, it entails lawyers who are looking at this film very carefully for libel and for fair use of archives. The fair use of archives, I've been through that, but the libel issues, there were 30 points in the film that the lawyers had brought up, and that we had to substantiate. Well, luckily, we had over the 2 year production of this film, um, we had enough evidence and enough um, substantiation of facts that we were just able to give those to the lawyers, and there were actually very few changes. So, and I think this just comes from my internal censorship, where I know what is fair comment and what isn't. So,
I'm so grateful to you for going through that nightmare, because truly this is the film that we can show people, right? This is not a film that people go, yeah, but, I mean, it really is just such a high quality. Now, you have a screening coming up in Toronto on May 9th. Where can people find out about it? Where do they buy tickets?
So people can buy tickets right online at www.covidcollateral.com, which is the website of the film that will take you to the Eventbrite ticket sales. And the film is showing at the Isabel Bader Theatre in Toronto on May 9th at 7 o'clock. I hope everyone within striking distance of Toronto will come, because it will be an eventful evening. We have a panel of 4 wonderful speakers. We have Rodney Palmer, who's a former CBC, CTV investigative journalist. He will be moderating. We have Dr. Jennifer Hibbard, who's the co-founder of the Canada COVID Care Alliance, and she knows an awful lot about ivermectin. And we have Bruce Party, a lawyer at Queen's University and the executive director of Rights Probe, and he's been speaking out about the new pandemic treaty. And we also have Dr. Roshanier Killian, who's a former emergency room doctor who has been in a battle with the Royal College of Physicians and surgeons. So it's going to be a feisty evening.
It's going to be an amazing evening. I'm really looking forward to being there. And I'm actually going to encourage people, even if you're not in the Toronto area, make a weekend of it. Go to Toronto. This is going to be an extraordinary event, and you will be the first to see this excellent film. Is there anything else you would like to say, you would like people to know?
Yes, thank you. I hope that the film will encourage honest dialogue between people within the reasonable people who are left of center and right of center, but those people who can actually speak in a reasonable manner. I hope we can. I hope the film will start that kind of dialogue, and the film is also carries a subterranean warning, because you can't help but ask yourself after you see the film, what happens next time? So I think we have to be very vigilant about our rights and about what happens when we face the next crisis, not necessarily a health crisis, but how do we want our leaders and our institutions to respond?
Really important points, Vanessa. Thank you. For me, the reason that I was excited about this film is exactly that. We need a dialogue. It's the reason that I got involved with the National Citizens Inquiry, was to be able to start presenting information in a way that everybody who is reasonable could at least examine and start to discuss. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your film. I'm really looking forward to being there. For those of you who cannot make it to Toronto on May 9th, I encourage you to go to covidcollateral.com and donate. It's actually a tax-deductible donation. So you could actually have the government helping to fund this film. How's that for a nice twist? So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Vanessa, for being here. For Lux Media, I'm Michelle LeDuc Catlin.